Hi there, welcome to Season AI, the platform where we speak truth to power. We're just making one or two changes, changing the background a little bit here and there. I want you to have a look at this discussion about GMOs. Very, very interesting. GMOs versus natural food. And here is somebody supporting natural food and the reasons why. I find the reasons very compelling. Let's have a listen. Let me just forward this quickly. 1 second.
Well, just before you take that meal, you might want to have a sit down and listen to this conversation. We're talking about GMOs.
GMOs.
Well, we're breaking it
Very
down to the
important.
category of food, genetically modified plants, seeds, and the rest. Yesterday, we had a conversation with a professor who spoke in favor of GMOs and essentially gave his own insights from science into this. But this morning, we're given a balance to it, and we're being
Yes.
joined by Professor Christopher Amoah. He's Executive Director, Center for Food Safety and Agricultural Research, CEFSA. He's right here with us in our Lagos studio. Good morning, Prof. Welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning.
Let's get right into it. We have a lot to cover. So it's been said, and this is a basic, that at some point everybody has had some GMO anyway. So why are you raising issues now when some meal, some fruit? The Prof yesterday gave the example of banana, that the original banana has seeds in it, but what we're eating right now does not have that seed. So let's start from there. It has been said that we've all had some GMO, so what's the point?
First and foremost, let's clarify the difference between GMO and hybridization.
Good.
So naturally, in the natural environment, plants, crops hybridize. It's a natural process,
Big
an
difference.
environmental
Hybridization, GMO,
process. So
two
the
different things.
confusion, the prof, I guess,
Very
must
good
have been
point.
infusing
Very good important point.
is the confusion of mixing up hybridization and genetic modification.
More.
Hybridization happens in the natural, either through the natural evolutionary process
Very important
or
point here.
by farmers, breeders who align with the natural processes to aid the crops, the plants to hybridize. And that could be the reason you see some of these plants over the years changing in their nature. Now, the argument that everyone must have eaten GMO at some point in time, so why are we raising the alarm now, is untenable. Clearly, when I was growing up, several years back, some of these ailments that we see today were not here. Question is, where are they coming from? Perhaps from those modifications.
This is the
Because
modifications in the food we
essentially,
eat.
everyone is what he or she eats. This mass
You
of body
are what you eat.
didn't just come in a day. It came
Very
from the
important
process
point.
of biochemical change of the food I ate into the tissue, the anatomy that you can see now. So, I give you a classic example. If it is true that everyone must have eaten GMO at a point in time, that explains clearly why we should interrogate the impact of GMOs, because they have been around and we have seen some consequences. And that's why we're asking questions. And I think everybody who eats food should ask those questions.
Very,
and
very
people should
important
stop
point.
demonizing or criminalizing those who ask questions. Because we see a movement, a trend that seeks to take absolute control of the human person to the extent that you give me something to eat and I don't have any right to even question what I'm eating. That's unfair.
The prof said yesterday, because I asked him, either me or one of my colleagues, I did ask, I said, look, the future, as far as GMO is concerned, I said, look, his argument is there's no scientifically proven data that shows that GMO cause cancer and all of that. So is this a question of scientific scholarship imbroglio, or there is actually something that we can look at and say, this supports these facts?
Both ends are tenable. You see, scientifically, there are hundreds of, I'm a scientist. I'm a professor of bioinorganic chemistry.
So
And
this guy
there
knows
are
he knows his onions. He knows what he's saying.
tons of
Let's have a
scientific
listen.
publications.
What are your thoughts, by the way?
Proven
What are
in
your thoughts?
established journals, proving the relationship, negative of course, of the impact of GMOs on human or animal health. Because some of the studies are done on animals and some are observatory, some are meta-studies, something we call meta-analysis. So when you take a population and you look at the impact of the certain kind of thing they've been ingesting, and you can draw up inferences. So there are tons of reports in that. Then secondly, You say, this is food. This is food. There's something naturally, everybody knows, it's called food poisoning. If you ate something, some pudding, or you ate something about 8 hours ago, and then your system begins to respond, you don't need me to go to the laboratory to tell you that you should find out what is causing that.
Indeed.
And we have seen there is a very popular report by Professor Arellini in Italy who demonstrated how they ingest feeding rats. Because, in animal studies, we look at those species that have similarities with the humans, and rats are like that. Now, these things cause testicular tumors. They caused cancers in those rats. Genetically modified maize was fed to those animals, and it caused cancers. And again, in science, we are also looking at the food chain. We've interrogated the food chain. There is this group of chemicals. I'm traditionally a chemist, moved into bioinorganic chemistry and into experimental medicine.
Yes.
Now, we have observed that, for example, a chemical, a herbicide known as atrazine, which was very fondly used around our environments, was causing a change of sex in amphibians, in frogs, in waters. Because when farmers apply these things, the crops that we eat are produced by plants that are known as vascular plants. That means they uptake, they have vasculature, like we have veins and arteries in our bodies. So when these things are applied, and these genetically modified organisms come with herbicides, pesticides, because, mind you, it's the same companies that are producing both. The companies like Monsanto, sorry to call the name, a company that was producing herbicides suddenly transformed into producing genetically GMOs. Now, we have also seen the process of genetic modification
very important point to make there.
Herbicides.
It's very, very important point.
That's why you have like a popular market name herbicide that is very popular across Africa. In Nigeria, it's very popular. From Benue, where I come from and I work, I see a lot of farmers use it. Go to the market, it's everywhere. Now, that chemical, that herbicide is called Roundup. And that herbicide is incorporated in the modification of some of those crops that are pushed to the market for commercial planting. They are called RR soy or RR maize or Roundup ready. That means these crops can withstand Roundup. That occasions farmers to apply Roundup at liberty to the fields. Because before now, let me give you a story. Before now, this company that was producing this chemical, this herbicide, was selling, and the major markets were here in Africa. But something happened because of the something we call scientifically phytotoxicity. These chemicals are toxic to the phytochemistry of the phytophysiology of the crop, of the plant. Now, these chemicals were also adversely affecting the crops, the plants. And farmers were experiencing some adverse effects, and some of the crops dying together with the weeds. So these companies now came up with modifying the crops so that they can withstand the impact, the effect of those herbicides. Now farmers are at liberty to apply those herbicides freely without fear of harming their crops. And what that means is that more herbicides are pumped into the environment, unlike when I was growing up, that my parents and myself, when I was being taught how to farm, because Benue is the food basket of Nigeria, and we all farm. Every household in Benue is a farming household. So we used to pull out weeds, but now go to Benue, everybody is pumping chemicals. And now what that means
very
is
harmful.
That environmentally, when rain falls, there is runoff, there is washdown. And some of these residues are run off into surface waters, and some of them seep into groundwaters. And then it ends up in human bodies because people drink those things, and some of it is absorbed and retained, persists in the vasculature or even in the anatomy or the structure of the seed crops.
Very important point being made. Yes, what are your thoughts?
These adverse effects are being experienced. If you go to the hospitals now, you see the graph is climbing. Juvenile diabetes. Before now, diabetes type 2 was not a disease of children. Before now, hypertension was not a disease of children, but it's rampant now. Where is it coming from?
Our guest yesterday did justify the application of those herbicides to, some GMO crops that are resistant to it. I can't remember in the exact same words that he used now. I'd have loved you to respond to that. But more importantly, you are talking about the emergence of certain diseases that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
And that was, formed part of the crux of our conversation yesterday. Despite the very real concerns about the possibility of some of these diseases being linked to the development and the introduction of GMO crops to our agricultural sectors, there still is very little evidence to prove it. So why are scientific researches few and far between that would link the concern about the relationship between these diseases and GMO crops?
I'm sorry, I have to correct you.
Go ahead.
The evidence is everywhere.
Overwhelming evidence.
The papers are there. I'm a scientist. I deal with them, I publish, I research. And in researching, we do literature review. We don't just jump into the laboratory to begin to investigate. We look at previous investigations and see where there are gaps, see where we need to improve. So the evidence, the publications are plenty there. If it was the right forum, I could reel them out to you. And then secondly, research is ongoing.
Professor
But
pardon me, sir. So for instance, for the Roundup corn now that is emerging, what is the scientific research to prove that the consumption of that is related to any type of cancer? And indeed, you can also talk about other GMO crops, for instance, the tomato and allergies, cancer.
In the corn you mentioned, I already mentioned the research in Italy. There are also researches in Argentina, in Southern America. Now, this research proved directly that these things have a direct link with cancers. Now, there is also many researches with respect to some of these ingredients, some of these chemicals, some of these processes that are used in genetic modification. I just mentioned one to you. Now, you insert pesticides. These are chemicals, which we know traditionally that are toxic. We know them as toxic. But let me say this. You see, there is this argument that this particular, for example, Teller maize that is released for commercial planting in Nigeria, where is the research? There are two factors that work against research. Number one, we, the researchers, are asking the federal government authorities, because we are patriotic, where is the research that proved that this thing is safe before
Valid
you
question to
approve
ask.
it for
Valid
commercial
question to ask.
proliferation? Yeah. So you see, let's not put the cart before the horse. That research, first of all, should be done by the one who is introducing it to prove to the consumer, because we're talking consumer protection now.
The safety.
To prove to the consumer that this thing is safe. Now they are saying, yes, it is safe, but you see, the second issue is that the proprietary companies that are pushing these organisms say that these are trade secrets.
You see, the government is not doing the job there. They should be.
Yeah, that's what they say. All over the world, they say
the research that proves that
yes,
the
because,
crops are
number
safe.
one, I need a sample of this Teller maize. Right now, I have not accessed it. Until I will surreptitiously go and disguise as a farmer, to go and collect it where they're distributing them, then I will go and run them. But before I run them, people would have, people would have started consuming them. So the first thing to do scientifically is for the agency regulating this to demand for this information from the manufacturer, because these are patented seeds. These are patented technology.
Seeds.
Somebody worked on them. So this agency ought to have requested for this. That's first. Secondly,
very good point.
This agency ought to have made this report, this information available to Nigerian consumers.
Indeed.
That's a list they should do.
That's
right?
the list.
Put everybody to know. Let us know what research or data backs the introduction of the safety. But I want to backtrack a bit, because I say if it's not broken, why fix it? So do we have a problem really with growing crops with yield such that we're now requesting or bringing in what is called hybrid or genetically modified crops? Do we have a problem with agriculture in Nigeria?
Yes and no. I like that question. I reiterate, I come from Benue State, the food basket of Nigeria. Over the years, beginning from around 2009, something unique began to happen in this country. and in some African countries. Food production centers began to be attacked in the name of banditry, insurgency, or whatsoever.
Listen.
Now,
Start connecting the dots.
automatically,
Listen.
That
Listen.
impinged on yields because farmers are killed. If you observe, it's not the people in the commercial centers that have been attacked. Rarely are they attacked. It is the farmers. And this prompts up the possibility of a hidden agenda that is being unrolled. Now, you observe that farmers are killed, farmers are being chased out of their farming areas, and automatically, what would you expect the next harvest season? The farms are not tended.
There'll be severe drop.
The quote and unquote, the cattle come in, eat what was planted. Now, that is the yes of the problem with our food production system or food supply system. And recently, Mangu, local government in Plateau, was attacked, and that affected maize production. And during that period was when Teller maize was released. I mean, does that, we are not speaking, we're not stating absolutes, but we are trying to pinpoint dots that anyone who cares will begin to try to connect them. It's just a deductive reasoning thing. Yes. Now, the next challenge is, food production has gone low. That's one. And there is this talk about climatic changes, climate change. There is something about climate change that is said to affect food production. It's not just food production it affects. But I'd like to clarify that climate has ever been changing from evolution. Climate has never been a static phenomenon.
Indeed.
Climate change has always been with us.
Facts.
And that is also part of what synergistically informs evolution. Species, according to what we learned in traditional biology, species evolved over time. And these are the attributes, these are the inputs that inform evolution.
Indeed.
But now, that in a way affects food production. But I think, and from empirical observations we have on the field, for example, when you have 800,000 farmers in Benue State living in IDP camps for 8 to 10 years.
800,000
Wouldn't
farmers
that affect food production, considering that Benue was
in Benue,
and has
living in
been
Benue,
a
IDP
major
camps.
feeder to the Nigerian food supply system.
Wow.
The same thing happens to Plateau, Nasarawa, Taraba, Jigawa. You remember you know about the Hadejia Basin? Now, interestingly, we think that these are issues that could be handled, not to go and begin to bring higher yielding crops to introduce.
Indeed.
That will promote monocropping and affect negatively the natural agroecology, the diversification of crops and plants. But before we go on, there is also something I'd like us to look at. You see, in this context, we are discussing about food scarcity, food shortages, and higher yield. Also comes an analogous context or concept of food sovereignty. He who controls your food controls your life.
Yeah, Prof, I was coming there.
Okay.
I was coming there, and you're going to land on that thought because I remember a doctor, one of our friends called Aproko Doctor. He said that I'm going to posit two things to ask my question. First, he said the whole idea of breakfast is the most important meal is not from doctors, it's from a cereal company advertising.
Yeah.
President Bola Tinubu, during the high-level meeting on counterterrorism, I would read the words he used in that meeting. Look at the illegal mining that plagues so many of our nations today. Those who think illegal mining has no connection with financing terrorism are sorely mistaken.
Yes.
The international community has both the moral and legal obligation to help this cause because it is external finance, talking about foreign money. Now, I posited these two to say that, are you suggesting, by your last thought, that this is another form of economic neocolonialism?
I would say yes. Absolutely.
You see, number one, the seeds that we traditionally use are not patented. I plant, I harvest, I reserve some, I plant the next season. But here is a new hegemony that is coming, and we need, as patriotic Nigerians, we need to educate ourselves that, first of all, this high yield, we have results in the field as scientists, that these so-called touted high yields are not reproducible.
See?
That means you plant and you get 8 tons per hectare this year, this planting season. Next season, you cannot replant that for 2 reasons. Firstly, the the company that owns the patent will forbid you from doing that. We've seen it happen in India.
I'm sorry, so you cannot dry them and
No,
plant them?
no. The licensing forbids that. The licensing forbids that. That means you are tethered to the producer of those seeds. That every season, you go back to buy them. And you know what that means. You know what that means. I don't need to overplug it. It means...
You know, the natural question on our minds, is the government aware of all this? I think that's what we
Yes.
maybe we can
End on that.
We
Yes.
don't think government is not aware of all this in absolute terms. That is why this education is needful.
But we now have a biotechnology agency. If government is aware of all of these dangers.
Let me tell you something about research. That biotechnology agency is a research agency, a regulatory agency. There is something in research that we call conflict of interest. You must have heard or read about it.
we know that.
Yeah.
Now, there's something very important, very, very important with research, which is called funding.
Right.
He who funds research determines the outcome of the research. Now, if you look at systematically, it's a sin song. It's taken for granted that ASU and federal government always have altercations.
Right.
Over what? Funding. Funding. So research has been systematically underfunded or not funded, and now exposing us researchers to those people who have the money to fund. And there is no free funding anywhere.
He who pays the piper dictates the tune.
Absolutely.
Prof, this has been a very interesting one. Clearly not the end of the conversation, but we have to anchor at this point. Professor Christopher Amoah, Executive Director, Center for Food Safety and Agricultural Research. Thank you for your thoughts, and we'll keep at this. Thank you very much.
I think it just made us, we're not thinking.
Well, there you have it.
There you go. The professor was absolutely on point. I needed to play this because I need us to be aware of where our food source is coming from. Like he said, our land is fertile, we were able to grow. They've used wars to destabilize our society. Farmers, over 100,000 farmers in Benue, for example, they've been displaced. They're in IDP camps. They cannot grow crops, which means that import affects the yields year on year. These are facts and realities that hasn't been factored in. So when somebody comes in and I'll say, oh, no, GMO food, and you have heard, GMO, it will grow it one season, it's not going to regrow again. You have to go and buy, it's patented. Whereas natural food, nothing with patented, it's just natural, there's no addition, and it actually improves itself, you know. Hybridization is something it talks about and toughens itself. So for me, I felt it was a topic to talk about GMO. I don't know how you found this. It was interesting. It was a very, very good topic, and I really appreciate the professor giving us a great insight that many of us had thought probably have not looked at. Now we can see the correlation between the wars going on in many African continents, on the African continent, and where there are areas of famine, where they're trying to chase away farmers, stop them from actually, growing natural seeds, and then replace it with theirs that they can control and extract funds from. These are the realities. So when we talk about genetically modified organisms and food and all of that, we do have to be very, very careful of the impact in our society, because those who are putting this forward are only in it in many respects from a profit point of view, not your long-term benefit. And the health implications of eating those food, they're not going to carry the cost. It's only a business as far as they're concerned, based on what the professor just said. But I wanted to know what your thoughts are on what you've heard now. Please do leave a comment. Let's hear from you. And let us know, what are your thoughts about the lighting and we've changed a few things. Leave comments, let's hear from you. Does it look good? We're changing some things, the background, we might change it now and then. Let us hear from you. And how can we improve this platform? And what questions and what topics would you like us to cover on a regular basis on this platform? Let's hear from you. Before we go, please go ahead and subscribe to Citizen AY. Subscribe, hit the notification button, give us thumbs up, and help us grow our platform. We really do appreciate your support. It was very, very interesting in listening to the professor there. Play it back again. And, it is a topic worth looking into. and I felt it was really something to bring onto the platform. Ladies and gentlemen, you're of course watching Citizen AY, the platform where we speak truth to power. Let's hear from you. Leave a comment, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so very much. What's left for me now to do is just say, please do leave comments, share, subscribe, hit the notification button, and of course give us a thumbs up. Thank you very much, and bye for now.